Paradum are called by name is because he is the one that inspires us and gives us the capability to serve the Eibishter with all mitzvahs in the way of the Paraduma, which is in a way of beyond just logic, but to do it with Kabbalah's oil, with Mesiras Nefesh. As we know that there's some mitzvahs that we do in a way of that could be done just in the way of understanding. So we need to have that inspiration from Moshe Rabbeinu. But then we challenged that. And we said that seemingly Moshe Rabbeinu did understand the idea of Paraduma. Since Moshe Rabbeinu did understand the idea of Paraduma, because he was in the level of Chachma Atzilus even while he was down here, so he perceived the understanding of Paraduma the way he was down here, even in this world. So therefore, the question is, how is it possible for Moshe Rabbeinu, who did have the understanding of Paraduma, to be able to communicate it to us, to bring to us a level of service to the Eibishter beyond understanding? And to be able to explain this, he started explaining that really all mitzvahs have in it two components. In other words, even though in general the mitzvahs are divided into Eidus and Mishpatim, the rational mitzvahs, and there's a level of Chukim, which is super rational mitzvahs, but in truth, all mitzvahs have in it their super rational side, even logical mitzvahs, even Mishpatim, are coming from Hashem's Ratzon, and Hashem's Ratzon is beyond Chachma. And then there's those mitzvahs, and so even the rational mitzvahs have that. And then there's the mitzvahs, even the super rational mitzvahs also come down. Like Paraduma has to come down to the Chachma of Torah. Torah is Chachmaschem, Torah deals with halacha, Torah has certain inyan of. So even the Chukim have in it components of logic. And the difference is to what degree it comes down into Seichel of the Nevrayim and not. So now he's continuing that idea. We're still holding the middle of the first approach to explaining how is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu, who understood the reason of Paraduma, is going to be able to imbue us with the capability of doing mitzvahs from the Mesiras Nefesh with Kabbalah soil, like Paraduma, beyond understanding. So we're still in the middle of that issue by bringing in that every mitzvah has in it the logic side and the super rational side. So again, page 10, line 5. This idea that all the mitzvahs, they are both aspects. Every mitzvah has an aspect of being super rational and logical. In the mitzvahs, looking at the perspective of the level of the will of the mitzvahs, that the Ratzon of Hashem that wanted that this mitzvah should be done. Kol mitzvahs same chukim. All mitzvahs are super rational, they're decrees, and the way a yid must fulfill them is like a person fulfills a decree, not because of his understanding, not because of his gishmak, but because of his accepting the yoke and the command of the king. Chוקת, I've made a law, I've made a decree. On the other hand, the time mitzvahs from the perspective of the reasons for the mitzvahs, kol mitzvahs hey mishpatim. All the mitzvahs have a logic to it. All the mitzvahs are rational mitzvahs. Even a mitzvah like Paraduma has in Chachma Atzilus a place that makes sense. And one needs to fulfill even those mitzvahs that are seemingly super rational, also because of the concept that there is a reason to it. So now that we know that every mitzvah has this, so it's not so puzzling or it's not so strange, first of all, that Moshe Rabbeinu understood that the reason for Paraduma, because in truth, we all have a connection with the concept of a seichel of the Paraduma. It says in line 11, Vaidesha Moshe Yada Tam, the mitzvah is part of Moshe Rabbeinu, knowing the reason of the mitzvah of Paraduma, Kim Gam mitzvah zum mitzalatam, that he fulfilled also this mitzvah. He had the advantage of being able to fulfill the mitzvah of paraduma, also based on reason. As opposed to every individual, what's the difference then the way I fulfill the mitzvah of paraduma because of a reason, and the way Moshe Rabbeinu? But by everyone else, except for Moshe Rabbeinu, the fact that he fulfills the mitzvah of paraduma because of a reason, the reason is the fact that he thinks into the fact that there is also a reason for this as well. In other words, the Rebbe often explains that even if we don't understand something, we can understand that it makes sense regardless. I think that Rebbe brings this much on the letter. If you go into a building designed by a beautiful architect, everything is in its place. It has 1,000 rooms in it, and 999 rooms make sense. The design, the layout, and each one is unique and each one is different. But you could see the logic of the design. And one out of the 1,000 rooms you don't see the logic in it. It just looks like a mess. It looks like a churban. You don't see any type of rhyme or reason or beauty or whatever to that particular room. So from the evidence of going through all the 999 rooms beforehand, and you see how much logic and how much beauty went into the design of all these other rooms, you can rely on the fact and believe and understand that this room makes sense also, but it's just beyond you. The same thing over here. It's not that the person looks at paraduma that it has no reason. He looks at paraduma that it has a reason, and he fulfills it as if he would know the reason because he knows that it has a reason, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, who actually knew the reason. So now, let us take it back to our question. Our question was, how can Moshe Rabbeinu, who knew the reason for paraduma, inspire us to do all the mitzvahs in a way of chukim, in a way of kabbalas oil, in a way of mesiras nefesh and self-sacrifice and bittul, if the mitzvah of paraduma by him wasn't a way that was logical? The Rebbe says in line 14, after the brackets, according to this, will be simply understood. Even by Moshe Rabbeinu was not lacking, heaven forbid, the fulfillment of mitzvahs in a way that I have made a law and I have decreed a decree. This idea of the decree, the law, the super rational aspect of mitzvahs, and the mitzvahs, it's because of the will of the mitzvahs, and that's to be found even though he understood the reason for paraduma, because he still had, like we have in all mitzvahs, every mitzvah has the ratzon component. So since every mitzvah has the ratzon component to it, every mitzvah has the super rational component. So Moshe Rabbeinu was not lacking that as well. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he fulfilled the mitzvah of paraduma, he had it in the way of, just like we have it in any other mitzvah that we understand, we can also fulfill it from the super rational perspective, because the Hashem wants. The same thing Moshe Rabbeinu had it by paraduma, that despite the fact that he understood the reason for paraduma, he still could fulfill it with and alongside with the idea of kabbalas oil, chukak, and that is how he would be able to inspire us to do the mitzvahs, the kabbalas oil, because of Gzeira Gazarti, because of the Ratzon of Hashem, and so on. That is the explanation that Rebbe is giving, how Moshe Rabbeinu, since he understood the mitzvah of paraduma, would inspire us to do the mitzvahs in a way of kabbalas oil and mesiras nefesh and so on. But the Rebbe is going to ask that Moshe Rabbeinu's key to inspiring us was not just Stam Moshe Rabbeinu, but it was linked to paraduma. We said v'yikchu eilecha para, that the paras in the kras al shmoish al Moshe. Paraduma is called by Moshe Rabbeinu's name, and the whole idea of the paraduma is that it was to bring the super rational component to all the other mitzvahs, that we should fulfill all the mitzvahs in the same super rational way, like it fulfills Zayis Torah. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, paraduma and all the other mitzvahs were the same. So what was unique that he did with the paraduma, that it's called al shmai, so he should inspire us to do all the mitzvahs like paraduma. By him, paraduma is no different than any other mitzvah. By him, paraduma is like any other mitzvah that has in it both components, the will aspect and the logical aspect. By us, if we were the ones that were being asked, yeah, paraduma is unique. It shows us how we have to do all the other mitzvahs that make sense in the same super rational way, like we fulfill Kabbalah soil, how we fulfill the mitzvah paraduma. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the whole point. That all the paras are called on the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu inspires us to do it in a way of paraduma. By him, paraduma, though it had a level of beyond understanding, it was no different than any other mitzvah that had a level of beyond understanding. So what's it about paraduma? So let's see inside the question. Line 18. This explanation needs another explanation. This explanation is insufficient. What is the uniqueness about paraduma over all the other mitzvahs? All the other mitzvahs, the reason conceals the rotz. So in other words, when we have a mitzvah that makes sense to us, as a mitzvah that creates chayv mitzvah, you borrow money from someone, you have a mitzvah to return it. Makes sense? Makes. So you lose and you become numbed to the godliness. It's a logical thing. It's not about Hashem's will. But mitzvah paraduma. On the other hand, when it comes to the mitzvah paraduma, there's no open and reveal. There's no reason that human intellect can comprehend from the vast majority of human beings. So the rotzen is revealed. Says, why am I doing this? The only reason I'm doing this is for Hashem. That's the meaning when it says this is the chukah of the Torah. Not Zois Chukas HaPara, but Zois Chukas HaTorah. We should call Mitzvah Torah Chukak my Paraduma. Torah is assuring us, don't think that there's some mitzvahs that are only because of logic. No, the truth is, all mitzvahs are super rational. But the problem is that the rational mitzvahs, the reason covers over on the Hashem's will. And he goes, but in 24, possession, the fact that it says they shall take to you. And as we said at the beginning of the Maimon, why does it have to say they shall take to you? They shall take the paradum, they shall make the paradum. Why are they taking it to Moshe Rabbeinu? That part in the Kras al Moshe, that the paradum is called by Moshe Rabbeinu's name. Mashma seems to indicate the Inyan HaMiyuchad Shemitzvah's paraduma, the unique aspect of the mitzvah of paradum. That is what's unique about paraduma, that the super rational aspect, the will of Hashem, that's beyond reason, is revealed. It also must be concerning Moshe, because we're saying that all the paraduma specifically are called on Moshe Rabbeinu's name, because Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that inspires us to do above reason. Of course, seemingly, Kimim Shemaishi, other time part, since Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason for the paraduma. What's the difference by Moshe Rabbeinu between paraduma and all the other mitzvahs? They're no different. Paraduma or any other mitzvah that we do that seems to be logical and we still have to do because of super rational reason that it's Hashem's will, it's no different by Moshe Rabbeinu when it comes to paraduma. So why is he saying over there, you know what? I have for you an unbelievable mitzvah. This is going to be inspiring for all the other mitzvahs to do it l'mayla mitam v'das. By Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't l'mayla mitam v'das. Any questions before we go on to the top of page 2? Okay, 6th page of your downloads is doubt. Use the Bahagdim Kosov Tefillah L'Moishe. This will be understood by first prefacing what it says in the pasuk Tefillah L'Moishe. The Isa B'Zohar is brought on the Zohar Tefillah L'Moishe Tefillas Asher. That the Tefillah for Moshe Rabbeinu was a tefillah of a rich person, because Moshe Rabbeinu was considered, the Gemara Nedarim says, Moshe Rabbeinu was rich. Moshe Rabbeinu became rich, it says, from the broken pieces of the luchas, etc. So when it says tefillah Moshe, that's called a tefillah of a rich person. And the Rebbe Derech Agav is going to, before explaining the whole idea of tefillas Asher, is going to go off a little bit on a tangent and explain the connection of this tefillah l'Moshe having to do with the Chag HaGeula, the Samayim of Yud Gimel Tammuz also. What has to do with the Friedrich Rebbe, Chag HaGeula. So it says in line 3, note from what the Friedrich Rebbe, the one whose redemption it was, said in his well-known Sichum, Mizmar Tefillah David, that the Mizmar of, Tefillah Moshe, Shayich LaGula Yutas Kislev. It's connected with the redemption of the Alter Rebbe and Yutas Kislev. How come? What's the connection between Tefillah Moshe and Yutas Kislev? Yadu, as it's known, Shadmur Azakhin Ha'ya'imir B'chol Yom Shir Tilm Moshe Nechlak in Me'ach Chodesh. The Alter Rebbe, just like we do Chitas, the Alter Rebbe also said that the Hillam Shir, the way it was divided according to the days of the month. Tefillah Moshe comes out is Kapitel Tzadik, Kapitel 90, and that comes out the Shir Tillam of the 19th of the month. Since the Mizmar of Tefillah Moshe is the beginning of the monthly Shir Tillam of the 19th of the month, so on the day of his redemption, Yudas Kislev, he said this chapter until move on. So therefore, the Rebbe extends this. If the Alter Rebbe said this chapter in Tehillim when he went out of prison, so even everything is Bajwaka Pratis, so it has to do with a date of release from prison. So also the Friedrich Rebbe, who was not on the same date, who was Yud Beis Tammuz, also has to do with Tefillah Moshe, even though it's not the monthly division of Tehillim. So he says, if this understood, that the Kapitel Tzadik that says Tefillah Moshe is connected also to the redemption of the 12th and 13th of Tammuz. Since it's the Geula of the leader of our generation, the one who filled the place of the Alter Rebbe, so therefore it has to do with him as well. But especially this year, Yud Beis Tammuz, Yom Yeledes Balagula, it's the birthday of Yud Beis Tammuz, as we know, is not just the day of Friedrich Rebbe going out of prison, it's also the birthday. He was born Yud Beis Tammuz, Tafresh Mem, 1880. Las Kolish Nasa Tzadik the Balagula. This mimer was said in Tafshin Chavtes. Tafshin Chavtes is going in that Yud Beis Tammuz. They were starting to say Kapitel Tzadik. He was going into his 90th year. On that year, became 89 years old. Since he's going to the 90th year, that's why we were saying then, in Tafshin Chavtes in 1969, the 90th Kapitel in Tehillim, it's the Mizmar of Tefillah Moshe. Okay. This is all, as we said, a little bit tangential. Now let's get into the topic that he's trying to explain about Tefillah Moshe, that the Zohar says that Tefillah Moshe was a tefillah of a rich person. So he says in line 18, with Tefillah Moshe, the idea and the content of this kapitel in Tehillim is that it's a tefillah for Moshe. The ideas that follow in that capital, after the words Tefillah Moshe, a godly man, These are matters that Moshe Rabbeinu said in his tefillah, specific matters that he's dealing with. But the general topic of this kapitel, that's also the name of this kapitel of this chapter until it's Tefillah Moshe. And the Tefillah Moshe, he tefillah Asher, that the tefillah of Moshe Rabbeinu is the tefillah of a rich person. Kanal, like we said before, this movement for this understood. Shaykh is da mizmar l'gul ditas kislev in beis Tamuz will be ikmitzad in yon in the chlos ha mizmar tefillah Moshe tefillah Asher. It'll come on Sifid Gimel. He says later on, we are now holding only Ois Hey. In Ois Yud Gimel, he's going to explain how Yutas Kislev, the Chagagul Yutas Kislev, the Chagagul Beis Tamuz has to do with this kapitel primarily because of the title, because it's called Tefillah L'Moshe, which is a tefillah of a rich person. Okay, now we have to break this down. What is this idea of a tefillah for a rich person, and how does it have to do with Moshe Rabbeinu? I say, Yuvin Zebahagma Diuk, that Norman Shabbos Masayim Ba'amari to be understood by first prefacing the question of the Rebbe Rashab in his Maimer, top of page Yud Aleph, Tibra Maskal Tefillah Moshe, the title that's called Tefillah Moshe. And in that Tefillah, who shemispala lakadosh baruch hu sheyimale es machzoire. That idea of davening, when a person davens, he's asking Hashem to fill a lack that he has. Since a rich person is not lacking anything, now Inyan Tfilas Ash, what is the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah being, or what's the general idea of saying the two words together, a tefillah of a rich person? Tefillah of a rich person doesn't make any sense. Now, in a moment, he's going to say, yes, there could be a rich person that's lacking something, but Moshe Rabbeinu's riches seemingly is not going to make any sense that he's lacking anything, and therefore, what is the idea of the tefillah? But before we go on, there's going to be a lot of reference to an expression, sus lirkev, a horse to ride on, and a servant to run before him and let everybody know that the horse is coming through, etc., etc. So let's understand there's three different categories, to put it that way, of assisting someone that is lacking, or let's put the word lacking in quotation marks. First of all, there's a regular mitzvah of helping a poor person. Poor person needs to eat, he needs to have clothes, he needs to have a roof over his head, needs to make chasna his kids, whatever. He needs to pay for his kiddush. There's the mitzvah of tzedakah. Fine. Then there's something that we've had many Amar Chassidus about this, brought down from the Gemara. That one needs to add and one needs to give someone sufficient for the sufficient. He has to what's sufficient for his need, what he is lacking, which means that if a person was accustomed to, he was a very rich person, and he became what like I mentioned when we were reading children's stories, we were always read in Yiddish about the person that was Yored Menachasa, a rich person that lost his wealth, that he suffers in poverty a lot more because he has greater needs and he's not used to poverty and so on. And one of the things the Gemara says is, if this rich person was used to a horse and a runner before him, just maybe to put it in modern terms, he was used to a chauffeured limousine. That was his primary mode of travel. So if the community can afford it, so we have to give him this because it is something that is lacking for him. But the Gemara says there is a third level which we do not have, a third level which is not even under the category of tzedakah, even for a rich person, and that is ein avol ein atamitzuva la'ashre. The Chazal say they machsoiro yachshe. You have to give him what he's lacking, but you're not obligated in making him rich, whatever that distinction may be. So again, there's three levels: actual poverty, basic needs, level of day machsoiroi, fill whatever his lack is, which is indicated by the terminology of a horse to ride on, a servant to run before him. And then there's a level of riches. And this will be important for this paragraph, next paragraph, to know these three distinctions, especially the latter two. So now the Rebbe goes on to say that even though we just now said that seemingly it makes no sense that a rich person should have an idea of tefillah, because tefillah means that someone is davening for a lack, and by a rich person there's nothing lacking. He's going to say, yeah, we could find something lacking by a rich person still to daven for, but Moshe Rabbeinu you can't find something to daven for. Let's see line 4. Yeshleimer, we could say, this question that the Rebbe Rashab asks, that how can we say the idea of Tefillah Ashir, that a rich person should daven because they're not really lacking anything. So he says, this is mainly by Moshe Rabbeinu. In general, by a rich person, Yeshleimer, we could say that his tefillah is that the Eibishter should fulfill his spiritual lack. So in other words, the rich person may have a lot of money, may have all that he needs, but spiritually he's still lacking. So therefore, he's davening to the Eibishter to assist him in filling his spiritual lack. Moshe, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, even when he was down here below, it shined him in a revealed way his source, the way Moshe Rabbeinu was not Tzilas, been named to such a degree that there's no type of division and separation between Moshe Rabbeinu, the way he was above, and Moshe Rabbeinu, the way he's down here below. As it says, Moshe lepostik time. By Moshe Rabbeinu, it doesn't say any separation, any trop that separates between one and the other. When Hashem, out of favor, would call great tzaddikim twice by their name. He would say Avram, Avram. He would say Yaakov, Yaakov, and so on. So this explains that that there's sick time in Begavayu. That in Trop, there's like, and you'll see it in the Chumash, there's like a line in between the first Avram and the second Avram. The first Yaakov and the second Yaakov. That sick timer, that Trop, that cuts off, indicates that there's a difference between Avram down here to a higher level of Avram in the spiritual realm. Yaakov down here, Yaakov above. When it says that Hashem called out Moshe, and it says twice, Moshe, Moshe, there is no trop in between. There's no line in between, indicating that Moshe, the way was above, and Moshe, the way is down here below, it's the same thing. So if there's no separation, and Moshe Rabbeinu experiences down here the same thing they experienced above, so not only is he rich physically, materially, he's not lacking anything, but spiritually, he's not lacking anything. How they move, so it's understood. This is actually Moshe Asher Bagashmi, is that the fact that Moshe was rich materially and physically, is because spiritually he was rich. In other words, because there was no separation by Moshe Rabbeinu between the physical and the spiritual realms. Also spiritually was not lacking anything. And what does it mean not lacking anything? Using again that terminology, he wasn't lacking anything, even the lack of a horse to ride on and a servant to run before him, which is a physical manifestation of lack. He didn't have that physical manifestation of lack because spiritually, whatever those indicate, he wasn't lacking as well. Therefore, the Rebbe emphasizes even more the question of the Rebbe Rashab. Therefore, the Maimer asked, what's the idea of the tefillah of a rich person? How is it possible that a rich person could be davening when davening indicates a matter of lack and deficiency? We'll stop over here. Any questions?